Hello everyone, welcome to Tactical Session 3. For today's session, we'll be focusing on 2v2s, both in attack and in defense. What's interesting when it comes to 2v2s is for the first time we have two defenders. In defense, that means we will have an extra player, so we can have one player push higher and provide press for the team, and another player drop slightly deeper and provide that cover for the team. Similarly, in attack, now that we have to overcome two defenders, we can no longer rely on a simple pass and move to get past. Now we will need to time our runs perfectly and ensure that our entire team is well synchronized to ensure that we can overcome the two-man defense. Similarly, as with all the other sessions, the coaching points will show up at the bottom of the screen. I will pop up in the top left-hand corner as well to give my feedback now and then. We'll have questions throughout the sections and we'll have a form at the end. But more on that a bit later. For now, let's enjoy the session. As we have in the last 2 weeks, again we want to keep the same steps in our defense. We want to close down the attackers. We want to show them in a desired direction where it's beneficial for us to make the tackle, and we want to regain position in that zone. The problem with a two-man defense though is that you now have a teammate that is going to assist you. So we must decide beforehand, before we close down the attackers' space, we have to decide which way we're going to show them. Well done, we've closed down the space, but remember again, like we've stressed throughout all the other sessions, we do not want to overcommit. So once we've come in, we're within reach of the attackers, about a meter's space, then we will slowly stop, slow down, and then gradually jockey them backwards until we're ready to move on to the next step. Then at this point, our leading defender will engage the ball carrier, and the ball carrier will either take on the defender, in which case we will revert to the 1v1 defending principles that we already addressed, or the ball carrier will release the ball into his partner, in which case we are ready to move on to the next step. Okay, up until this point, the defenders have done very well to eliminate the second striker. Now what they need to do is ensure that that second striker does not become part of the play again by either a pass going over, through, or around the defensive block. With that in mind, the front defender can now start showing the attacker into the target zone, while the second defender provides the necessary cover and is available in case an attempted pass goes into that second attacker. Now that the attacker is in the position we've shown him towards, it's time for our front or first defender to make that tackle. Keep in mind again, we don't want the ball to go towards the second attacker, so the first defender should just keep that in mind when approaching to tackle. For the covering defender, however, it's very important for that defender to read the game. Okay? If his teammate is beaten and it's 2v1, he'll then use the principles that we addressed last week. Push up, close space, cut the defense, make it 1v1, show again, and then attempt to tackle. But if his teammate has managed to exert some control over the ball but has then lost it, so in other words, the attacker does not have full control over the ball, it's then time for the covering player to jump on that opportunity, clear the ball out, and avoid a 2v1 altogether. If finally, however, the attacker comes out of the ball and is nowhere close to it, this would be an opportunity for that covering defender to pick up the ball and then drive at the now overexerted attack. You would then drive past them, and since you have position, you will then control that spell of the game. That marks the end of defending in 2v2. Let's quickly run through those principles once again. Now that we've finished with defending in the 2v2, it's time for us to move on to attacking in 2v2 situations. Again, we will start as the blue players on the left side of the screen. Our job is to beat the orange defenders and get past them and go off screen on the right hand side. Now we will move on to the attacking principles of 2v2. Again, in attack, our main aim is to create space. But this week, because we have two defenders to beat, we will need a more systematic approach by our attack to beat those two defenders. We will do so this week using principles of an overlap and principles of the 2v1. But first, we must create that initial space by using width and depth. Now that we've managed to engage the first defender, the ball carrier releases the ball and makes a run to the opposite side so as to create even more width. That run must be well timed in relation to the pass as well. The pass, in the meantime, must come from the second striker who has now received the pass. That pass from the second striker can either go through, around, or over the top of the defense. But the main aim of that pass is to beat the defense. The attack in the meantime must time the run so that it's not too early, otherwise he'll be offside or the covering defender will stop him. And he must not be too late, otherwise the pass will go, he'll make his run and he won't be able to get to the ball. We had a look at the 1-2 as a way to beat the defense. Now we're going to look at overlaps. With overlaps, we want the ball carrier to engage the defense while the second striker makes a run in behind to receive the pass from the ball carrier. Now, first step here is to create space out wide where the ball carrier was. And what we will do to create that space is have the ball carrier drive infield. By driving infield, the second striker should also remain infield, allowing both defenders to be dragged into the middle of the field. Once this has happened, we can then move on to the next step. It is now time for the second striker to make that run in behind. That run on the outside into that space that we've created, it's important for it to be very well timed. Again, if it's too early, the defenders will become alert to it and they will work to cut it out, making it more difficult for us to be successful. And if it's too late, the pass might go out of play because our second attacker will not be able to get onto the ball. So again, that switch must be perfect. And as that second attacker gets the ball on the outside, he should then look to drive past the defense so that we have beaten the defense. And with that, we've essentially finished the attacking part of the 2v2 as well. Now keep in mind, although we used a 1-2 and an overlap as ways to beat the defense, the essential principles still remain the same. So we will run through those principles once again, see if you were paying attention, and then I'll see you for the conclusion at the end. And that marks the end of Tactical Session 3. This week we addressed 2v2s, we addressed the attacking principles and the defending principles. We had a look at press versus cover in defense, and we had a look at the 2v1-2s and overlaps in attack. What all of this boils down to though is creating numerical overloads. While with the 1v1s it was fairly simple, when we got to the 2v1s we saw that it was very easy for the attacking team to win because they had the overloads. And similarly, it was very difficult for the defense to win because they were bombarded by the extra numbers. So what we need to address from here on out, 2v2 and all the way through, is we want to create advantages for ourselves by creating numerical overloads. What we did today in the defense was we split the attackers so that it became a 2v1 in our favor. And then when it was our turn to attack, again we only engaged one defender at a time. Again, so we could create 2v1s in our favor so that we could get around that defense. These are the principles that you will need to absorb and understand moving forward, because the team that is able to create more numerical overload and that is able to overload defenses will be the team that is most likely to score. Similarly, a defense that is able to get players back into position and is able to have a free player is most likely to survive any attack. With that, we conclude. And although we're done with the 2v2s this week, we still have some unfinished business from the 2v1s of last week. Last week we released the form for the 2v1s with a bunch of questions for you to answer, and Karu Theron got the most correct answers. Well done, Karu. Very proud of you. Again, similarly, this week we will release the form. Anyone will be free to answer. And then based on that, we will then announce our winner for Tactical Session 3 2v2s next week.